Hello, my name is Xiang Chen. I'm an assistant professor at UCLA. Today I'm presenting XAlgo, a paper on the design probe of explaining algorithms' internal states via question answering. We know that these days algorithms often function as black boxes to non-computing users. To combat this black box problem, we design and study a question answering approach to explain algorithms based on a visualization. I'll start with the motivation. To combat the black box nature of algorithms, there is a plethora of research these days. I subscribe to the keywords explainable artificial intelligence, and every 1 or 2 days, I receive an email with a long list of newly published papers. Most of existing XAI research often takes a reconstructive approach, which means they are trying to reconstruct an alternative version of a black box AI model that is more understandable to humans. Wick and Thompson, in the classic paper, make the distinction between the line of reasoning, which is the model's original approach, versus the line of explanation, that is the version that makes more sense to a human being. One example would be Ribeiro's line paper, which can reconstruct a linear model to approximate the decision boundary that overfits the data point similar to a specific input. The problem of reconstructive approach is that although it does explain the AI to some extent, it's just an approximation that does not actually represent how the AI model works, and it does not permit users to look into to obtain more insight about the AI model. Sometimes students learning algorithms do need to obtain such insights, as well as network admins troubleshooting routing policy, or field operators trying to analyze robots' behavior in the wild. We call this type of users those that are between the end users and the algorithm developers. They don't necessarily understand how the algorithm is developed, but they do want to gain more insights by peeking into the black box. So our research goal is to explore interactive mechanisms that can support these users to obtain more insights of the algorithm, not only by showing how the algorithms work, but also by answering algorithm-specific questions by users. And more specifically, we focus on explaining the internal state of deterministic algorithms that do not depend on statistical training data. To achieve that, we developed the XAlgo model that first classifies a user's question based on taxonomy, locate the relevant information in the algorithm, and then generate an answer. For question classification, we consider these 5 different types of questions: causality, rationale, contrast, description, and confirmation. In the interest of time, I'm not going to detail each of these definitions. Please refer to our paper for more information. The first step is to extract the key parameters in the user's question, such as the interrogative word, which means the why, what, or how word in the sentence of the question. They're often at the beginning, and they often indicate the overall question type. Time shift is when the question might refer to not just now, but maybe the future or the past states of the algorithms. An object means the question contains certain algorithm entities, such as elements in an array, and those entities often have values, such as an array would carry different elements, and then there is action the question might be referring to, such as swapping 2 elements in an array. So once we extract this information from the question, we'll then check if the question is concept related. As we focus on the states, we refer concept related questions to a lookup table. And if it's indeed not about concept, but about the state, we'll then try to map the question into one of the 5 aforementioned question type. Notice that sometimes a single WH or interrogative word might refer to different types of questions, such as for why is asking causality, why not is about contrast, and why do is about the rationale. Now that we can classify the user's question, the next step is to generate answer. We represent an algorithm by means of using the pseudocode to generate a hierarchical directed acyclic graph, or HDAG. An algorithm would start as a root DAG, and whenever there is a loop, conditional branch, or recursive call, we would create a child DAG. And then each node eventually will correspond to a line of code that will cause some value changes in the main data structures, such as the element in an array when it comes to a sorting algorithm. First, we need to locate the answer node in the HDAG. So a question is asked at a specific state of a running algorithm. We call this node corresponding to this state the current node. And oftentimes we have to apply time shift because the question might be referring to the past or the future in order to find the right current node. And sometimes the current node is not necessarily the node that contains the answer. So we need to find the actual answer node. To locate the answer node, we follow these rules. I'm not going to go through every rule, but I just want to mention one of them. For example, if it is a causality question, we'll consider two cases. If the current node is nested in a conditional statement, then we consider the parent is the answer node. So usually the parent is the if statement that explains why this particular branch is chosen. That could answer the user's causality question. If it is not in a conditional statement, we just consider the previous code, the antecedent node causes the current node, assuming that there is a cause and effect in the order these lines of code is executed. As another example, if the question is contrast, we would just negate the answer node, the answer node's goal in order to extract information. For example, when the user asks why didn't 5 move when compared with the pivot, the user is trying to see what happened if this action hadn't been taken by the algorithm. And we just simply extract the goal of this node, which is to sort the current partition into a subarray smaller than the pivot and a subarray larger than the pivot. And then we negate it in the final answer to inform the user that the contrastive outcome would have happened if this action hadn't been taken. So that's a very brief introduction of our model. Again, please refer to our paper for more details. Next, I will talk about the design probe. We situate XAlgo in an algorithm learning and understanding scenario based on quicksort. And notice that we also combine XAlgo's QA capability with Visual-Algo, a visualization platform of algorithms. Our study was a Wizard-of-Oz study in which an experiment would manually simulate XAlgo's question classification and answer generation method. The independent variable is the method, which is either XAlgo or Visual-Algo. And we employed a between subject design with 9 participants for each condition, and they were screened to make sure that they had limited knowledge of algorithms. The process is quite straightforward. There was introduction and training, followed by interacting with the system, doing some multiple choice quizzes, and the final walkthrough where they have to play the algorithm to actually sort a simple array of elements and post-study interview. XAlgo participants asked in total of 88 algorithm-related questions. However, 37 are concept-related, showing that it's probably because these participants are unfamiliar with the algorithmic terms. The other 51 questions were related to the algorithm states. Among them, 21 were causality rationale. So often the same question can be answered both as a causality and as a rationale type of question. So we combine these two together. 17 were confirmation, 12 were description, and only 1 was contrast. We summarized several themes of the findings, and we just want to mention a few in this presentation. For example, participants found it difficult to come up with questions to ask or to articulate and formulate what they wanted to ask as a question, showing that there is a need to provide resources for composing questions by the participants, such as a question bank or a recommender to suggest what questions to ask for the convenience of the user. We also found that participants thought XAlgo's answer was too wordy. It contained details, but too much details. That means in the future design of XAlgo, we should consider the presentation of the retrieved information, such as breaking it down into smaller chunks, or even conversationally delivering those information to the users. We found no significant difference between the two conditions when it comes to the multiple choice performance or the walkthrough scores. And the average scores of the participants were at the low end, meaning that the learning was probably too difficult for novices in less than an hour's time. And also passively waiting to answer questions is probably not ideal for learning. We need more proactiveness. To summarize, we present XAlgo, a design probe of explaining algorithms' internal states via question answering. It is a model that can classify users' question, locate the answer, and present it back to the user in order to help to understand the specific state of a deterministic algorithm. And our study found that participants asked questions covering most of the categories in taxonomy, and there were several themes that can summarize how they thought about and responded to XAlgo's answers. Among them, one of the findings was that for learning, it's not enough to just passively waiting to answer user questions, and probably more proactiveness is needed. I encourage you to read our paper. I'm happy to answer more questions.